Ambassador Lee Minho adjusted his dark blue uniform one last time as he walked through the massive corridors of the Galactic Council station. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway that once bustled with human diplomats, trade officials, and cultural ambassadors. Today, he walked alone. The grand chamber stretched before him like a vast arena. Thousands of seats curved upward in perfect circles, each section designated for different species. The Zeltharai occupied the golden tier with their crystalline forms catching the artificial sunlight. The massive Gorvani delegation filled an entire section, their bulky frames requiring reinforced seating. Delicate wisp representatives floated in specialized atmospheric bubbles near the ceiling. Minho found his assigned seat in what had once been a thriving human section. Now, 4 to 7 empty chairs surrounded him like silent witnesses to this moment. He sat down carefully, placing his hands on the smooth armrests, and watched the holographic displays come to life above the chamber floor. The charges appeared first, written in the common galactic script that glowed bright red against the dark background. Military expansion beyond approved limits. Research into forbidden technologies. Unpredictable responses to diplomatic initiatives. And finally, the classification that had doomed his species, galactic threat potential. Minho almost smiled. They had no idea how right they were. Chancellor Velthari materialized at the center podium, her translucent form shimmering with authority. She had led the Andromedan coalition for over 3 centuries and commanded respect from every species in the galaxy. Her voice, when it came, resonated through translation devices in hundreds of languages. "We gather today to vote on Proposal 847 Alpha," she announced. "The complete banishment of the species known as humans from all Galactic Council territories." The voting began immediately. Minho watched the numbers climb on the holographic display above his head. The mechanical collective voted yes within nanoseconds. The Hive Queens of Sector 7 added their unanimous support. Even species that had traded peacefully with Earth for decades cast their votes for banishment. Around him, delegates whispered excitedly among themselves. The felinoid representative from the cat worlds actually purred with satisfaction. A group of insectoid delegates clicked their approval in harmonious rhythm. The energy in the chamber built like pressure in a sealed container. The final tally appeared in massive glowing numbers, 96.8% in favor of exile. Only 23 species had voted against the proposal, and most of those were small mining colonies that depended on human trade routes. Cheers erupted throughout the chamber. Delegates leaped from their seats, embraced their neighbors, and celebrated as if they had just avoided a cosmic disaster. Some species had waited decades for this moment. The territorial wars of the previous century had convinced many that humans expanded too quickly and fought too efficiently. The recent breakthrough in human quantum research had terrified others. Chancellor Velthari raised her arms for silence. The celebration died down to excited murmurs and occasional outbursts of joy. She turned toward Minho's section, her ancient eyes focusing on the lone human figure. "By overwhelming majority vote," she declared, "the species known as humans are hereby banished beyond the Outer Rim territories. You have 1 standard galactic year to evacuate all settlements, stations, and claims within Galactic Council space." The chamber held its breath. Every delegate turned to look at the human section, waiting for the expected reaction. Some anticipated anger, others feared desperate threats, and many hoped for the satisfying sight of human defeat. Minho stood slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. He smoothed his uniform jacket and clasped his hands behind his back in a gesture that had become familiar to the council over his 15 years of service. His face showed no anger, no fear, no desperate pleading. Instead, he smiled. "Honored council," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber without amplification. The translation devices spread his words to every species present. "You seem to believe you are punishing us." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the curved tiers of seats. Thousands of eyes, sensors, and optical organs focused on him with intense curiosity. "In reality, you have just given us the greatest gift possible," he continued. "Complete freedom from your limitations." The chamber fell deathly quiet. The celebration stopped as if someone had thrown a switch. Delegates who had been cheering moments before now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Minho took a step forward. "For decades, we have operated under your rules, your restrictions, your fears. We have limited our research to approved fields. We have constrained our expansion to designated zones. We have moderated our responses to fit your comfort levels." His smile widened slightly. "You vote to banish us because you fear what we might become if left unchecked. But you have never asked the more important question: What will we become when we are finally free to reach our full potential? A low murmur began to build throughout the chamber. Some delegates began to look uncertain. The mechanical collective's representatives started rapid calculations, their optical displays flickering with new data streams. 1 galactic year, Minho repeated, nodding respectfully to Chancellor Velthari. We accept your generous time frame. In fact, we will not require nearly that long. He turned and began walking toward the exit, his footsteps the only sound in the massive chamber. At the doorway, he paused and looked back one final time. Thank you, Council, for setting us free. The door closed behind him with a soft whisper, leaving over 1,000 representatives in stunned silence. The emergency meeting room beneath the Swiss Alps buzzed with quiet energy as Admiral Kim Tae-hyung entered. 200 of Earth's most important military leaders, scientists, and government officials sat waiting in the underground chamber that had been built specifically for this day. The room's walls displayed real-time data feeds from every major city on Earth, showing populations that should have been panicking but instead seemed strangely calm. Admiral Kim walked to the central podium, holding a crystal data pad containing the official banishment decree from the Galactic Council. He was a tall man with graying hair and steady hands that had never shaken, even during the darkest moments of the territorial wars. Today, those hands were perfectly still as he placed the pad on the reading stand. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's advanced acoustics. 37 minutes ago, Ambassador Lee Min-ho transmitted the Council's final decision. He lifted the data pad and began reading. By overwhelming majority vote, the species known as humans are hereby banished beyond the Outer Rim territories. He paused, looking around the room. Not a single face showed surprise. No one gasped or stood up in shock. Instead, he saw the same expression on every face, anticipation mixed with something that looked almost like relief. Operation Phoenix is now active, Admiral Kim announced, setting down the decree. All protocols we have developed over the past 30 years are now in effect immediately. The room erupted in controlled activity. Officers activated their personal communication devices, sending coded messages to military bases around the world. Scientists pulled up holographic displays showing complex manufacturing schedules. Government officials began coordinating with civilian authorities who had been quietly preparing their populations for this moment. General Park Hyojin, commander of Earth's orbital defenses, stood first. Admiral, the shipyards report full readiness. We can begin the first wave of launches within 6 hours. Excellent, Admiral Kim replied. Dr. Park Ji-hyo, what is the status of our mobile infrastructure? Dr. Park Ji-hyo, Earth's chief scientist and the woman responsible for humanity's most advanced technologies, activated a three-dimensional display that filled the air above the conference table. The hologram showed Earth's orbital ring, but instead of the simple stations that alien observers expected, the display revealed the truth: massive construction facilities that had been disguised as research platforms for decades. Every major shipyard has been operating at 50% capacity for the past 5 years, she explained, her voice filled with quiet pride. We told the Council we were building exploration vessels and trading ships. In reality, we have been constructing the largest fleet in galactic history. The hologram zoomed in on individual ships. They were enormous, each one larger than most alien space stations. But unlike the crude transport vessels that other species might use for evacuation, these ships gleamed with advanced technology that made Council warships look like ancient relics. Each Ark ship can house 12 million people comfortably, Dr. Park continued. But they are not just transport vessels. Every ship contains complete manufacturing facilities, quantum computers more advanced than anything the Council has seen, and enough raw materials to build entire colonies. Admiral Kim nodded approvingly. How many ships are ready for immediate launch? 437, with another 200 completing final systems checks, came the reply. At current production rates, we will have over 1,000 ships ready within 1 month. The Admiral turned to address the entire assembly. The Council believes they are forcing us into exile. They think we will struggle to survive beyond their borders, perhaps even beg to return under their terms. His expression hardened. They have made the greatest strategic error in galactic history. He activated another display showing human settlements throughout Council space. Colonies, trading posts, research stations, and mining operations dotted hundreds of star systems. To alien observers, these looked like the normal expansion of a young spacefaring species. For 30 years, we have been building not just ships, but an entire mobile civilization, Admiral Kim explained. Every human settlement contains hidden manufacturing capabilities. Every research station has been developing technologies that would terrify the Council if they knew what we were really working on. Dr. Park Ji-hyo stepped forward again. While the Council restricted our research to approved fields, we have been secretly advancing in areas they forbade us to explore. Quantum manipulation, consciousness transfer, matter reorganization, and technologies we discovered in the precursor ruins that they were too afraid to even touch. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity had not been preparing for peaceful exploration. They had been preparing for independence on a scale that the galaxy had never imagined. The first wave launches in 6 hours, Admiral Kim announced. Priority Alpha settlements will be evacuated first, along with all critical manufacturing equipment and research facilities. But remember, this is not a retreat. This is the beginning of humanity's true expansion into the galaxy. Above ground, across Earth's surface, the carefully planned operation began. Entire cities started the process of controlled disassembly as massive transport ships descended from orbit. But there was no panic, no crying children or desperate families. Instead, humans moved with the efficiency of people who had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. In the depths of space, alien monitoring stations watched in growing confusion as humanity's response defied every expectation. This was not the chaotic flight of a defeated species. This was the organized departure of a civilization that had been waiting for permission to leave. The galaxy had voted to banish Earth. But as the first ARC ships powered up their drives and began moving toward the outer rim, alien observers realized with growing dread that humanity had not waited to be asked twice. 23 years had passed since the great ships of humanity disappeared beyond the outer rim, and the Galactic Council had settled into a comfortable routine of congratulating itself. The Grand Chamber that had once echoed with heated debates about human expansion now hosted peaceful discussions about trade routes and cultural exchanges. Chancellor Velthari, now in her 4th century of leadership, often remarked that the galaxy had never been more stable. The morning reports were always the same: shipping lanes clear, no territorial disputes, crime rates at historic lows. The aggressive species that had once caused problems seemed to have learned better behavior. Even the notorious Krillian raiders had mysteriously ceased their attacks on merchant vessels. The Council attributed this golden age to their wise decision to remove humanity's disruptive influence from galactic affairs. Dr. Krixtal worked alone in the Deep Space Monitoring Center on Centaurus Prime, surrounded by banks of sensors that constantly scanned the galaxy for unusual phenomena. She was a middle-aged Centaurian with the typical blue-scaled skin and 4 arms that allowed her to operate multiple control panels simultaneously. For most of her career, her job had been routine: tracking asteroid movements, monitoring solar flares, and cataloging the birth and death of distant stars. But 3 months ago, her instruments had started detecting something strange. It began with small anomalies in the readings from the galaxy's edge. Energy spikes that appeared for microseconds before vanishing. Gravitational fluctuations that made no sense according to known physics. At first, she had dismissed them as equipment failures or interference from natural phenomena. Then the readings became stronger and more frequent. Dr. Krixtal spent her days hunched over holographic displays that showed the empty void beyond the outer rim. This region should have been completely dark, devoid of stars or significant matter. Instead, her sensors detected massive energy signatures that pulsed with artificial regularity. The patterns were too organized to be natural, too complex to be random. She ran the data through every analysis program available, cross-referenced it with historical records, and consulted with colleagues across the galaxy. Nothing in their databases matched what she was seeing. The breakthrough came when she noticed that the energy signatures were moving. Whatever was generating these readings was not stationary. The sources traveled through the void at incredible speeds, following paths that seemed to connect multiple detection points across thousands of light-years. Dr. Krixtal worked through the night, mapping these movements and calculating their patterns. When the computer finished its analysis, she stared at the results in disbelief. The energy signatures were not random phenomena or unknown stellar objects. They were artificial constructs on a scale that challenged her understanding of engineering and physics. "Computer, verify these calculations," she commanded, her voice shaking slightly. The response came immediately: verification complete. Analysis confirms the presence of artificial structures measuring approximately 50,000 kilometers in diameter. Energy output suggests power generation equivalent to harvesting the complete output of a main sequence star. Dr. Krixtal sat back in her chair, trying to process this information. 50,000 kilometers in diameter would make these structures larger than most planets. The energy levels suggested technology beyond anything the Council had ever developed. She expanded her search parameters, directing every available sensor array toward the regions where the signatures appeared strongest. What she found made her question her own sanity. The void beyond the rim was not empty. Her instruments detected dozens of massive objects moving through space, each one generating enough energy to power an entire star system. Some readings suggested artificial gravity wells so intense they bent spacetime itself. Others showed quantum tunneling effects that indicated technology capable of manipulating the fundamental structure of reality. But perhaps most disturbing were the construction signatures. Her sensors detected ongoing building projects that dwarfed anything in galactic history. Raw materials were being moved on scales that suggested entire asteroids and small moons were being harvested and transformed. The energy patterns indicated manufacturing processes that could build structures the size of small planets within months rather than centuries. Dr. Crixtal knew she had to report her findings, but she also knew that the Council would demand proof. She submitted a request for a long-range reconnaissance mission, citing unusual stellar phenomena requiring investigation. The scout ship that launched 3 weeks later was crewed by volunteers from 6 different species and equipped with the most advanced sensors the Council could provide. Their mission was simple: travel to the coordinates Dr. Crixtal had provided and gather detailed information about the anomalies. They never reached their destination. 50 light-years from the outer rim boundary, the scout ship encountered something that changed everything the Council thought it knew about the post-human galaxy. A wall of automated platforms appeared on their sensors, materializing from empty space as if they had been invisible until that moment. The platforms were sleek and beautiful, constructed from materials that seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. They moved with fluid grace, positioning themselves in a perfect defensive formation that blocked any further advance. No weapons were visible, no threatening gestures made. Instead, the lead platform broadcast a message on standard galactic frequencies. The voice was unmistakably human, speaking in the calm, polite tone that had once been familiar in council chambers. "Greetings, travelers. This space is restricted for your own safety. We recommend that you alter course and return to council territory. Your presence has been noted and logged. Have a pleasant journey." The scout captain, a veteran Andromedan with decades of experience, tried to negotiate. "This is a council reconnaissance mission. We are authorized to investigate unusual phenomena in this sector." The response came immediately: "We are aware of your authorization. However, council authority does not extend to this region. For your safety and the safety of your crew, we strongly advise immediate withdrawal." Sensor readings showed that the platforms were not alone. Behind them, stretching into the distance beyond the ship's detection range, lay something that made the crew's minds reel. Energy signatures on a scale that suggested entire artificial star systems. Gravitational patterns that indicated structures larger than anything that should be able to exist. The scout ship turned back, but not before its sensors captured one final reading that would haunt the dreams of every council member who saw the report. The energy signatures were not stationary installations or hidden colonies. They were mobile. Entire civilizations that moved through space as easily as ships sailed through water, carrying populations and industries that had grown beyond the Council's ability to comprehend. Humanity had not simply survived their exile. In 23 years of freedom from Council limitations, they had become something the galaxy had never imagined possible. The first sign of trouble came at exactly 1432 Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday that would forever change the galaxy. Trade Captain Vextar was piloting his cargo hauler through the Zephyrian system, carrying a shipment of rare metals to their mining colonies, when his communication system went completely silent. He tried every frequency, every emergency channel, every backup communication array his ship possessed. Nothing. The 12 worlds of the Zephyrian Empire, home to over 40 billion beings, had simply stopped talking. Captain Vextar was a seasoned trader who had been doing business with the Zephyrians for 30 years. He knew their communication protocols better than most species in the galaxy. The Zephyrians never went silent. They were loud, aggressive, and filled every channel with constant chatter about their mining operations, slave auctions, and military conquests. But now, as his ship approached the outer planets of their system, his sensors showed something impossible. The massive strip mining operations that had scarred entire worlds for centuries had stopped. The orbital slave processing stations that had been visible from light years away were simply gone. Even the giant military shipyards that had churned out warships for the Empire's expansion campaigns showed no signs of activity. Captain Vextar's hands trembled as he activated his ship's long-range scanners. What he saw made no sense. The Zephyrian worlds were still there, still orbiting their star, but they looked completely different. Where once there had been polluted atmospheres and devastated surfaces, he now saw clear skies and green landscapes. The massive cities built on slave labor had been replaced by smaller settlements that seemed to blend naturally with their surroundings. He was still trying to process this information when every communication device in the galaxy suddenly came alive with the same transmission. The voice was human, speaking with the clear pronunciation and formal tone that older species remembered from the days before the Exodus. But this was not a voice from the past. The speaker identified herself as Admiral Kim Se-young of the Terran Stellar Commonwealth. Citizens of the galaxy, the broadcast began, we address you today regarding recent events in the Zephyrian system. The government known as the Zephyrian Empire has been dissolved due to extensive crimes against sentient life, including systematic slavery, environmental destruction, and genocide of smaller species. Captain Vextar nearly crashed his ship as he tried to maintain course while listening to this impossible announcement. The Zephyrian Empire dissolved? By humans? The same humans who had been banished from the galaxy 23 years ago? All Zephyrian populations have been relocated to suitable worlds where they will receive education and support to develop peaceful societies, Admiral Kim continued. Their former slave populations have been freed and provided with transportation to worlds of their choosing. This action was taken in accordance with the Terran Stellar Commonwealth's Charter of Universal Rights. The transmission included holographic footage that made Captain Vextar question his own eyes. Massive ships unlike anything in known technology had appeared around each Zephyrian world simultaneously. There had been no battles, no resistance, no desperate last stands. The Zephyrian military, which had conquered dozens of worlds over the centuries, had simply been neutralized in a matter of hours. The footage showed Zephyrian civilians being peacefully transported aboard pristine vessels while their former slaves were given medical treatment and offered choices about their futures. The strip-mined worlds were being restored with technology that seemed to rebuild entire ecosystems in real time. The galaxy chose to exist without humanity, Admiral Kim's voice continued, and now Captain Vextar could see her face on the transmission. She appeared to be in her 30s, far too young to be the daughter of the admiral who had led the human exodus decades earlier. Now you will learn to exist under humanity's protection, whether you requested it or not. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence that lasted exactly 7 minutes before every government, military organization, and news service began broadcasting emergency communications. Within hours, the Galactic Council had mobilized the largest fleet in its history. 5,000 warships from dozens of species converged on assembly points throughout Council space, preparing to investigate what had happened to the Zephyrian Empire and confront whatever humanity had become. Admiral Thexon of the Andromedan Navy commanded the lead battle group as they jumped toward the former Zephyrian territory. He was a veteran of countless conflicts, including several skirmishes with human forces before their banishment. He expected to find evidence of a massive battle, perhaps human ships stripping the Zephyrian worlds for resources. Instead, he found human vessels waiting for them at every jump point. The ships were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to be constructed from materials that shifted between solid metal and pure energy, their hulls reflecting light in patterns that created impossible geometric shapes. They moved through space with fluid grace, positioning themselves not as a blockade, but as a welcoming committee. Admiral Thexon ordered his sensors to scan the human vessels, hoping to determine their capabilities and weaknesses. The results terrified him more than any enemy he had ever faced. His instruments could detect the ship's presence and general size, but they could not determine how the ships functioned, what powered them, or even what they were made of. It was as if humanity had advanced so far beyond known technology that their ships existed according to different laws of physics. Human vessels, Admiral Thexon broadcast on standard military frequencies, identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came immediately from a ship that appeared to be their flagship, though it was impossible to tell which vessel was actually in command. The voice was calm, professional, and terrifyingly polite. Greetings, Admiral Thexon. We are representatives of the Terran Stellar Commonwealth. We are here to ensure that the transition in this system proceeds peacefully. Your fleet is welcome to observe, but we ask that you maintain your current distance for everyone's safety. The Admiral realized with growing dread that the humans were not treating his battle fleet as a threat. They were treating them like curious tourists who needed to be kept at a safe distance from dangerous construction work. The galaxy had banished humanity to get rid of a problem. Now humanity had returned to solve problems the galaxy had been too afraid or too weak to handle. The reformed Galactic Council chambers looked different now. Gone were the celebratory banners and proud displays of member species achievements. Instead, holographic screens showed real-time data from across the galaxy, crime rates at 0%, slavery officially extinct, environmental restoration projects on hundreds of worlds, and something that would have been impossible just months before, complete galactic peace. Chancellor Velthari sat in her crystalline chair, looking older than her 4 centuries. Around her, representatives from the remaining member species whispered nervously among themselves. The chamber that had once held 847 different delegations now hosted barely 300. Not because species had been destroyed, but because many governments had simply been quietly replaced with something better. The massive view screen at the chamber's center flickered to life, showing an image that made every delegate fall silent. Director Choi Yuna appeared before them, but she was not broadcasting from any world they recognized. Behind her, through transparent walls that seemed to bend space itself, they could see stars arranged in impossible patterns. Her ship was the size of a small moon, but it moved through space like a living creature. The vessel seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at the same time, its structure shifting between solid matter and pure energy in ways that hurt to watch directly. This was not just advanced technology, this was something beyond their understanding of what technology could be. Director Choi herself appeared to be in her early 30s, with the kind of ageless beauty that suggested humanity had conquered more than just death. Her dark hair was perfectly arranged, her clothes were simple but made from materials that seemed to shimmer with their own light, and her expression was calm in the way that only came from absolute confidence. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems that had been upgraded with human technology, I address you today not as a supplicant seeking readmission to your organization, but as the representative of the Terran Stellar Commonwealth. The title was new to most of the delegates, though intelligence reports had begun using it after the Zephyrian incident. The Commonwealth was not just humanity's government, it was something entirely different, a form of organization that spanned not just star systems but entire regions of space. 23 years ago, you voted to banish us from this galaxy, Director Choi continued. You feared our potential for growth, our tendency to push boundaries, and our refusal to accept limitations that you considered wise and necessary. On the chamber's secondary screens, data began flowing that made the delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Maps showed human expansion beyond the outer rim, but this was not the slow, careful colonization that other species practiced. Humanity had claimed entire spiral arms of distant galaxies, built artificial solar systems, and created mobile civilizations that traveled between star clusters. In our exile, we discovered something that you had always suspected but never dared to confirm, Director Choi said. The precursor ruins that your species declared too dangerous to study were not just archaeological sites. They were gifts left by our predecessors, waiting for a species brave enough to unlock their secrets. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Every species in the galaxy knew about the precursor ruins, ancient structures found on dead worlds throughout the galaxy, containing technology so advanced that touching them had driven entire research teams insane. The Council had banned all precursor research after several species had destroyed themselves trying to understand the alien technology. Humanity not only studied the precursor legacy, Director Choi continued, we surpassed it. We learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, to bend space and time, to transfer consciousness between bodies, and to create artificial intelligences that manage fleets spanning multiple galaxies. The screens now showed images that challenged the delegates' understanding of reality. Human ships that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. Manufacturing facilities that could build planets from raw stellar material. Cities that floated freely through space, powered by artificial stars that had been constructed rather than born. Death is now optional for humanity, Director Choi announced matter-of-factly. We have eliminated aging, disease, and accidental death. Our citizens can choose to live for centuries or transfer their consciousness to new bodies as needed. We have transcended every biological limitation that once constrained us. Chancellor Velthari found her voice at last. If you possess such power, she asked, her translation device struggling with her trembling speech, why do you concern yourselves with our affairs? Why not simply leave us to our own devices? Director Choi's expression softened slightly, showing something that might have been compassion. Because despite your fears of us, we have not forgotten our connection to this galaxy. In the past 6 months, we have eliminated 17 oppressive governments, freed over 200 million slaves, and ended 6 active genocides. We have restored damaged ecosystems on 93 worlds and provided medical treatment to populations that were dying from preventable diseases. The data supporting her claims appeared on every screen in the chamber. The Krillian slavers had been relocated to agricultural worlds where they were learning to grow food instead of harvesting people. The toxic waste dumps of the mechanical collective had been cleaned and converted into gardens. Entire species that had been on the brink of extinction were now thriving under human protection. "We do not seek to rule you," Director Choi explained. "We seek to protect you from the darkness that exists in every civilization. The galaxy has never been safer than it is today." Around every council world, the delegates knew, human ships maintained their silent vigil. Not threatening, not demanding tribute or submission, but simply present as guardians against any force that might threaten peaceful civilizations. "You voted to banish Earth because you feared what we might become," Director Choi concluded, her ageless face serene. "You never considered that we might become exactly what the galaxy needed, not conquerors, but shepherds of a universe that finally knows true peace." The transmission ended, leaving the council chambers in complete silence. 847 species had voted to exile humanity from their small corner of the galaxy. Now humanity had returned to claim not just their galaxy, but their responsibility to protect it. The galaxy had voted to banish Earth. Humanity had not waited to be asked twice. They had left, grown beyond imagination, and returned as the guardians of a peace that the Council could never have achieved on its own.